This is your Idjit, Paul Mackey, with another episode of One Idjit's Thoughts on Podcast. That was goofy, but anyways, I'm back, and I'm going to look at the Next Night episode from that crossover event on Whiz Kids and Simon & Simon, which means I will be looking at Simon & Simon, Season 3, Episode 5, Fly the Alibi Skies, originally aired Thursday, October 27th, 1983, the night after A.J. Simon helped out the Whiz Kids. That day of note, I'm introducing a new segment for shows from the past. We'll look at the date of broadcast and get a little flavor of what's going on that day or week of broadcast. I probably won't do this for Gravity Falls, but, I guess I'm not sure how far back people get nostalgic for these days. For all I know, I have 18-year-olds listening who think back fondly on those heady, long-lost days of 2012. I'd love it if you could give me some help sussing out how far back is the cutoff for this segment. idjitcastpodcast@gmail.com. Comment on the post at nimlas.org, or comment on this YouTube video if that's how you're consuming this episode. So, on Thursday, October 27th, 1983, eccentric publisher Larry Flynt allegedly hired a hitman for $1 million to kill fellow publishers Bob Guccione and Hugh Hefner, along with Frank Sinatra, although he later said it was all a joke. On the music charts, the number one song in the U.S. was Islands in the Stream, as performed by Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton, and in the U.K., the number one song was Karma Chameleon by Culture Club. In U.S. theaters, the top 5 movies that week were in ascending order. Number 5, Mr. Mom. Number 4, the political thriller Under Fire. Number 3, The Big Chill. Number 2, The Dead Zone. And number 1, Sean Connery as James Bond in Never Say Never Again, which the Fleming estate failed to block the release of, and which I know I saw at the Roseville 4 theaters at some point during its original run, though I'm not sure if it was this week in question. Now, onward to Simon & Simon. Here's a brief summary. A man named Hannon is at a nightclub and says that he has an early flight to San Francisco in the morning, but in the next scene he is shown picking up a different man at San Francisco Airport. Rick and AJ watch a news report about an L.A. homicide being investigated by an old adversary on the police force, Lieutenant Bogartis. Then they are hired by a woman to find her brother, Albert Allred, who's been missing for a week. They search his apartment and figure out via receipts which bar he frequents. The bartender said Allred was a regular after accepting a small token from the brothers to jog his memory, and that recently his pal Skip joined them there. We saw Allred call Hannon Skip on the day he picked him up at the airport in San Francisco. The bartender adds he saw Skip on the TV the day before, too. It turns out Hannon was the ex-husband of the murder victim from the news reports, but he had an alibi of being on a flight to San Francisco at the time of death. The woman died the same day Allred disappeared. The boys confront Hannon, who claims to barely know Allred. Soon after, they are called out to a remote spot by a phone call from a man claiming to be Allred, where they get shot at. They file a police report about the incident, and at the police department, there's a confrontation with Lieutenant Bogartis, who warns them to stay away from the case. Allred's body is found up in San Francisco, so he couldn't have been the one shooting at them. They go back to Bogartis and present the theory that Allred killed Hannon's ex-wife, but Bogartis is not interested. After further investigation, they realize the full scheme. Hannon bought a direct ticket to San Francisco, had Allred fly on that ticket, and meanwhile took the other flight and killed his ex-wife, later killing Allred as well to tie up loose ends. They want to dig further into the flight records, and AJ calls someone who's good with computers. AJ has Richie look into flight records while Rick stays downstairs with Mrs. Adler. After the initial search comes up empty, Richie keeps the search running. Later, they confront Hannon with their theory and end up in a bar brawl. After Rick calls in a favor, they work out there was money involved between Hannon and his ex-wife's husband. Furthermore, they find out that Hannon has been busy closing out bank accounts to leave the country, so they go to see Bogartis with the new details. He still doesn't want to hear it. Richie and the gang discover Hannon's upcoming flight to Mexico City, continuing to Rio. Rick and AJ head to the airport while they have Richie cause flight delays by entering phony special requests from a travel agency. The Simon brothers manage to chase Hannon down as passengers get off the delayed flight. In the end, the news report shows Hannon was charged with his ex-wife's murder, as well as Allreed's, though Bogartis leaves out any mention of them while speaking with the press. All right, my favorite line.
We're all set. His mom said to come on over.
His mom?
Yeah. He's not home from school yet.
Home from school?
Who is? There are so many people I could go into for this one. We see Jonathan Banks as Police Lieutenant Bogartis. You may recall this is not Mr. Banks' first appearance for us. We previously saw him as a shady doctor at the Sunnydale Rest Home in the pilot episode of Whiz Kids. I will also point out Daphne Reed, a.k.a. the second Aunt Viv, playing the TV reporter Temple Hill. The series has two main leads, and I pointed out last time we recently saw a much earlier performance by Gerald McCraney on the Rockford Files. This time, I'll go ahead and look in depth at Jameson Parker, in both of these episodes as A.J. Simon. Jameson Parker was born Francis Jameson Parker, Jr. in Baltimore, Maryland in 1947. He attended Beloit College in Wisconsin and began acting there. He moved to New York, landing some commercials and off-Broadway work before a big break on One Life to Live in 1976, on which he continued until 1978. Following that role, he appeared on the big screen in The Bell Jar and then on Family and Heart to Heart. In 1981, he landed the part of A.J. Simon, which continued until the show ended in 1989. He guest starred a few times following the end of the series, on McCraney's sitcom Major Dad, and on Murder, She Wrote, Burke's Law, Walker, Texas Ranger, and Jag, his final acting role so far. In 1992, there was a confrontation between his wife and their neighbor, and when Jameson went to confront the neighbor, he was shot twice, in the right arm and left armpit. He made a full physical recovery, but has since been haunted by PTSD, which has severely impacted his ability to perform, thus the reduction of acting roles in the 90s. He has since taken up freelance writing, mainly in publications focusing on sporting and the outdoors, and has written an autobiography and several novels as well. Right, totally 80s. Boy, was this episode ever a throwback to a different time in air travel, from flying on someone else's ticket, which I personally have done, to muscling through security and making it to the tarmac, which I certainly have not. I do have suspicions that they made it to the tarmac via the benefit of plot convenience. I would hope that even airport security of 1983 would have stopped them earlier than that, if they hadn't been wielding the powers of the TV detective. Artifactoids. At Hannon's Club, we see people taking a ride on a mechanical bull. The mechanical bull was, of course, popularized at Mickey Gilley's nightclub in Texas and made famous by the 1980 John Travolta and Deborah Winger film Urban Cowboy. At Gilley's Club, the bull was first installed in 1976 by Gilley's business partner Sherwood Cryer. The ride was popular and never appeared to result in the lawsuits they feared despite the ride at your own risk signs. Cryer bought out the El Toro product rights and patents in 1979 as shooting on the picture was underway at the club. I don't know for a fact that the people in this episode are riding a El Toro bull, but it does seem pretty likely. One article I looked at from over 20 years ago suggested the El Toro Manufacturing Company was still in business at that date of publication, but as far as I can tell, it no longer exists. The original Gilley's Club failed in the late 80s after Cryer and Gilley had a falling out, and Cryer passed away in 2009. There are plenty of companies using the El Toro name, but as far as I can tell, none of them manufacture mechanical bulls. So what worked? I thought this was a pretty good detective story, and of course the addition of the Whiz Kids was noteworthy. They definitely toned down Alice's crush, though Rick Simon took an apparent liking to Richie's mom. Perhaps if the Whiz Kids went multiple seasons, another crossover could have brought them together again, but I guess we'll never know. I like that they didn't softball the hacking. I suppose they felt they had the leeway to show less socially acceptable hacking when not on a show that is aimed toward a younger demographic. What didn't work? Well, it would be unfair to judge Simon and Simon on the amount of screen time the guest stars get, but I'm not being fair, I guess. I would have liked to see the Whiz Kids play a part more equal to what Jameson Parker had in The Night Before on their show. They got a nice hacking scene, though not quite as intense as the before-show preview made it appear. They hacked a travel agency, not air traffic control, as it sort of seemed to imply. So next time, we're back to the regular series, Whiz Kids Episode 4, Candidate for Murder. Happy hunting! You've been listening to the One Idjit's Thoughts On podcast, produced by Paul Mackey in association with Nimlas Studios. Any short clips of audio from shows is included under fair use for commentary purposes, and copyright for that content remains with its original copyright holders. The theme song is Too Good by Jack Mangan and is used by his generous permission. One Idjit's Thoughts is produced under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. You can find more episodes of this podcast and many other fine podcasts at nimlas.org. You can contact me by emailing idjitcastpodcast@gmail.com or commenting on episodes at nimlas.org.
Let's make our own memories.
It's been pointed out before, but 1983's 47 years old is not today's 47 years old.